Hi, everybody, and welcome to our presentation within a presentation, the QFT, an equitable and authentic approach to teaching and learning. My name is Kendall Boninti, and I am the library teacher at the Cambridge Fringe and Latin High School.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Hart, and I am one of the instructional technology specialists at Cambridge Fringe and Latin School, and Kendall is my work wife.
This is true. So today we're going to be talking to you about the QFT with English learners, or ELs. And before we dive in to what we've done, we wanted to start with the why. Why use the QFT with English learners, and what makes it such an effective teaching protocol to use with students. And really, it's because it puts students at the center of the learning, right? Or at the heart of the learning. It also invites students to participate in authentic and complex challenges and thinking. It creates opportunities for teachers to step aside and let students lead the inquiry. It also allows teachers to learn from their students, which is great. It builds community, which we know that learning a language is learned best with others, right? And so it creates that social aspect of learning the language. And then it also taps into students' funds of knowledge, or that cultural wealth that they bring with them into our classrooms. So here's what we did. We designed a 6-week unit, a project-based learning unit that was all around the topic of sustainability. So students were reading The Omnivore's Dilemma. That was their anchor text that they were reading. And they were, throughout this unit, they were operating as informed consumers who were thinking about how can we eat sustainably and live sustainable lifestyles, right? And so we designed a series of experiences for them throughout this project, which actually on the next slide, we can show you the different milestones of the project. So when you design a project-based learning project, you think in terms of milestones or significant moments in the project. So take a moment and check it out. What we're going to talk about in our presentation today is the project launch. And the launch is used to get students excited about the topic, to activate prior knowledge, and to help kind of like launch them into the inquiry piece. And so we did this in a couple different ways. We designed a little mini activity with students where they had to compare and contrast their eating habits and food shopping experiences in their home country to their to their eating habits and shopping in the United States. It was an incredible experience that really brought the class together. They realized that so many students had similar lived experiences in their home countries, and also had a lot of the same experiences kind of coming to the United States and navigating this new landscape. And so when we're thinking about ELs, right, there are certain things that are important to consider when you're planning and designing in order to kind of optimize the learning experience for all of the learners in front of you. One of them is building culture. So for us, this was the build the culture experience, right? Create that safe, comfortable space where students feel that they can share and be supported. So we did that before we jumped into the QFT. And that's another thing that we found is asking questions. You can feel very vulnerable and it can be intimidating, especially if it's not something you're used to doing. And the QFT can feel really new, especially in a lot of our American school systems too. Oftentimes the teacher does the question asking, right? Not the students. So it's really important to build the culture and make students feel super comfortable before you just jump right into the QFT. So that's what we did.
By the way, does anyone have a guess? Not that we can see you or hear your answers, but if anyone's guessing what this mystery food is over here, the answer is, do you want to tell them? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
I remember. It was Cheetos. A lot of people thought Doritos.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It was Cheetos.
Cheetos. That's right.
One of
Yes.
the most popular snack foods in the United States, by the way.
There's like 6 different types of corn in that.
A
Pretty
lot of
gross.
corn. Yeah.
Yeah. So another tip when working with ELs is to make sure that you pre-teach the questioning rules. And you do this anyway with all students, you pre-teach the rules, but it's really important that students understand the rules and that you take that time to really discuss them and answer any questions around the rules. Also really super important is pre-teaching questioning words, and depending on the level of your EL students, they might need support here. So we did a little brainstorm and asked students to help us come up with what words, do we use when we are asking questions, and this is the list that they came up with. So that can be an important step. Other things too, when you choose your Q focus, right, your question focus, it's really important to think about the vocabulary that's included in that Q focus as well. And so the teacher we were working with chose this quote from Michael Pollan, who wrote The Omnivore's Dilemma. So it was great. If it came from a plant, eat it. If it was made in a plant, don't. Well, we realized that students might not understand the difference between plant and plant. So we took time to talk about that before we actually jumped into the activity. So that can be important as well. Okay, Nicole, take it away, the instructional technology specialist.
Thanks, Kendall. So we decided to use Padlet for the QFT, and I cannot take any credit for this. It was actually thanks to Sarah. It was about a year ago at the height of remote learning and the pandemic that Sarah gave a presentation about using the QFT, I believe with primary sources. And so we saw how they used Padlet in a remote environment, and it just seemed brilliant. We had just gotten a subscription to Padlet, and this just seemed like such a great way to document student thinking and to have this wonderful collection, and also really invited students in a more collaborative way to ask their questions. In the past, as you know, with the QFT, if we were in person, there would be paper and people work in groups, and you're kind of hiding your questions from the other groups. But what we loved about using Padlet here was that it was very like a collaborative spirit. And so you'll see here that we had the Q focus. We also, during the QFT process, we enlarged the image and kept it on the screen when we were screen sharing for students so they could see the quote and really think about it. But then they also had access to look at the Padlet and read the questions. So we've blurred out students' names here just for privacy, but we had them work in groups, and that was a choice of the teacher in the class. She grouped them based on who she thought might work well together. And we found that this was a really nice way to organize the questions. We had tried it in another class. It was a smaller class where their questions were just kind of scattered all around, because in Padlet, you can choose different templates to organize the posts. And that was a little bit trickier for students to navigate because they couldn't find their posts necessarily. What's great about this is that they focused on their groups and then to ask as many questions as possible. And then we also gave them time to review other groups' questions and then go back and add any more questions that they thought about. Kendall and I have co-taught a PBL class for the past couple of years. It's a professional development course. And so Sarah actually came in and trained our group on the QFT in person. It was a really big deal. And so we've been using the QFT with learners and with teachers for a couple of years now, but doing this on the Padlet, personally as a technology specialist, I find really exciting. And then students can go in and they can like each other's, or they could add comments. We didn't have comments here, but it's just a really great way, again, to document that for the students so they could go back and look at it later.
Which we did go back later, actually, which is great. Yeah, we did go back later, and actually after the students had started reading the book and started doing a little research, we went back to revisit their questions and just see what they'd learned, which was great. So many different ways. I love that on Padlet, I don't know, you don't lose those questions. They don't just disappear, with a piece of paper somewhere. So Sorry, go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, no, that's okay. Yeah. So debriefing the QFT, just like any kind of protocol, is really critical. And we wanted to be able to give students that opportunity because we realized it was a new experience for them. So these are just some of our favorite quotes that we got in the feedback. We really loved, I liked that I was the one asking the questions instead of the teacher. The student really felt empowered about that. Another student said it made me realize how much I already know about the topic. And another student who was a little frustrated said, it made me realize how much I want my questions to be answered. They were like, when do we get to find out the answers? So that was a really fun moment as well.
So Nicole and I put together a slide of some of our ideas of best practices. This doesn't, by no means is this a comprehensive list, but it represents some of the things that we frequently do when working with English learners. And so again, those low stakes activities that build culture, spread joy, create safe spaces, that's super important to do before you do the QFT with students. Reviewing the questioning criteria, the scaffolding, we talked a little bit about some of the scaffolding, but if you're working with lower level, ELs, sentence frames, sentence stems for some of those questions, I wonder, that can be really, really important. Also, just translating everything into students' home languages can be really helpful as well. Pre-teaching as much vocab as you can. For all my library teachers out there, we teach the language of inquiry. So think about that. What are the vocab words that we frequently talk about? Things like citations and stuff that we might not explicitly teach those words, but it's so important to do. So make sure you're pre-teaching the vocabulary as well as the tech vocabulary. And co-creating list of questioning words or statements, modeling everything. Nicole was awesome. I mean, when she would go onto Padlet, she would show the students, this is how you make a post, showed them where they could write everything. So you have to build in that time. But we did the QFT with them multiple times after that initial time. And that first time, I think it took over an hour. And then the next time we did it, it took about 40 minutes. And then it was like 30 minutes. So over time, they just get used to doing it. And then grouping, we said that the groups tended to work better on the Padlet because they're building off of each other's ideas. So we highly recommend grouping, lots of visuals all the time. And then the debrief process, which is just so important. It also shows them that we care. This is a valuable experience for them and for us, and that we learned a lot from them throughout the whole process. So here are a few recommended books for getting started. Obviously, Make Just One Change is our #1 recommended book. I read it years ago and it just changed my whole teaching practice. And then if you're interested in combining the QFT with project-based learning, these are two great books, Setting the Standard for Project-Based Learning and Project-Based Teaching, both really great books that kind of give you a blueprint of how to do it, which is great. So thank you so much for joining us. And you're free to reach, we'd love to hear from you. So please email us or reach out to us with any questions or comments, or if you want to collaborate in some capacity.
I'm going to stop sharing so they can see our faces bigger on the screen.
All right, great.
Yay!
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.